Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Mr. Sean Cunningham from Fox 40 and Mr. Brenden Nunes from the Kings Herald and the Kings Pulse podcast. What's up, gentlemen?
Not much, man. A little tired, a little groggy from last night, but excited to be here with you guys. We got a lot to talk about.
We do.
Have plenty to talk about. Head coach locked in. Sean was talking to him yesterday.
Locked and loaded. Okay, so if you were like, just shut your phone off for the weekend, like I did inadvertently.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute. But if you shut off your phone this weekend, which you should have because it was Mother's Day, of course, the Sacramento Kings did hire a new head coach in Mike Brown, and a 4-year deal from what I'm hearing. And he will start as soon as the Golden State Warriors season is officially over. You know what? Let's just start there. Brenden, what were your first thoughts when you heard Mike Brown, head coach, Sacramento Kings?
I was taking a nap, so of course had to be doing something while it was going on. I was relieved. I will say I was a little worried about what would happen if Mark Jackson was the choice, just like what the reaction would look like from the fan base and everything after that, with it allegedly being Vivek's idea there. So I was pretty relieved that it was Mike Brown. And part of me is a little curious if I'm more excited about Mike Brown because it's not Mark Jackson. But, you know, when you look at Mike Brown's history, obviously he's got an impressive resume, and I'm excited. I think he's the type of guy that the Kings need to set a culture and have some accountability on the defensive end specifically, but really on both ends of the floor. So I'm looking forward to it. Where were you at, Sean?
Well, I got to say, I still keep getting... look, I get a little annoyed with the whole, as James aptly put it, Team Edward versus Team Jacob. Like, this notion that you have these finalists, okay? First of all, you have 7 that started with, and then you get it down to the 3, but which really became 2, as if it was like Team Edward versus Team Jacob for you. Is that what? Did I get that right? That's for Twilight,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Or as I kind of put it, trying to decide between the 2 meals that are in front of you, because let's say Vivek Ranadive's favorite meal was in front of him, like some just ribeye steak, whatever, okay? And then over here is this garden salad that he'd rather not have. No, it was like this appetizing, equally great pasta that, you know, point being is like he was comfortable either way. And the notion that like he just despised Mike Brown or didn't want anything to do with Mike Brown and was all in on Mark Jackson, and it was like, here's Mark Jackson on this side, and this is Vivek Ranadive, and here's the rest of the front office with Mike Brown. Like, it wasn't really that way. Like, if you're going to become a finalist, Vivek Ranadive is looking at having to be comfortable with any 3 of those going forward. So I just see too much of that on social media, which again is a vile, toxic place, and we shouldn't crowdsource from there. But I've been hearing it a lot on the radio too, and it's just kind of astounded me, as if like they literally had to chain Vivek up and say, "No, you idiot, let's go this way," and he had to be talked into it. No, I'm sure he probably did have some favoritism towards Mark Jackson because he had that familiarity with some of the things we outlined last week. But ultimately, I do think the basketball minds played out, but Vivek Ranadive was certainly part of that, and I just don't want... That's not me sticking up for him. I don't want to come off as a Vivek defender, but it's just reality that, you know, and again, I always say it's not exclusive to Sacramento. Look what's going on in Lakerland. You've got the Buss family who's all over their interviews. So back to the original question, Mike Brown, yeah, I mean, I said it here. I said when the 7 were there, I wasn't all that impressed with the list, but if I had to pick one, it was Mike Brown. So I think they got it right. You're not going to find many more coaches that are more experienced than Mike Brown, and certainly has a nice track record of taking a team and getting them into a winning fashion. Now, maybe that doesn't mean championship necessarily, but I'm curious to see what he can do with this team. I think they have some up-and-coming pieces. They certainly don't have a Kobe or a LeBron or things like that he's been used to in the past. So this is a little bit intriguing, but he has winning culture, defensive mindset, and I love the fact that he can play in almost any kind of style. And he comes from that Greg Popovich tree, Rick Carlisle tree, and now a Steve Kerr tree. So there's so much influence there. So I think there's a lot to be excited about. But at the end of the day, fellas, talent wins out.
I agree. Yeah, I'm excited about Mike Brown. I was not excited about Mark Jackson. I got to be honest. There's just too many red flags. And I think he deserves a shot in the league. I just don't think that the Kings were the place to get the shot. I also think that if Vivek did have an opinion, we heard at least what it might have been. And, of course, that was Mark Jackson. I think that the fact that Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox, that they got to make this decision is a good thing. That we now kind of have that feeling that these guys came out of it as, whether it was like a huge internal struggle or just a minor internal struggle, it didn't matter. They came out, the basketball guys came out on top. And so I think this is a good hire. I don't know why we have to defend a guy with a 6.16, career win percentage who's made it to the playoffs in all but I think one real season of his entire career, who's, made it all the way to the NBA Finals as a head coach. I don't think that there should be a lot of defending a guy that with that kind of resume, and a guy who, once he left as a head coach, went on to go spend 6 seasons with one of the best franchises with a brilliant mind in Steve Kerr, for the last 6 years. So I like Mike Brown. We all talked about it on Thursday. This was the guy. This was a guy that we thought would be the new head coach as we got through the weekend. And so I'm glad that they ended up settling on Mike Brown, and they were able to get him. And I think that that's a good get. Okay, so before we dive too deep into the discussion, let's just take care of the business side. If you're watching on YouTube, go down and give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you're not a subscriber to the Kings Beat, we've had a ton of new subscriptions lately. Thank you to all the new subscribers to the Kings Beat. But jump on board with the Kings Beat. It's the best way to get your information, the quickest way to get your information, and it gets delivered right to your email box once a day, 4, 5, 6 times a week. So we're not going to spam you, but you're going to get plenty of content. Outside of that, we do have a happy hour that's going to be coming up. Probably, it won't be next week. It'll probably be the week after. So, right around that, I don't know, what is that? Third week of May. We'll get someone in here for a new, another happy hour, and it should be fun. Outside of that, guys, it's going to be like a highly debated thing that as we go through, we're kind of moving past, I guess, the debate part of this and into just the realization of who Mike Brown is as a coach. He, of course, coached the Golden State Warriors to a victory in the playoffs on Monday night because Steve Kerr has unfortunately got the COVID. And Sean was there, and we've got a video of Mike Brown, and I'm going to set this up, and then Sean, once the video's done rolling, why don't you kind of walk us through the night, because it was eventful. There was a lot of jokes about the Kings getting their first playoff win in 16 years. But
before we do that, James, can we walk through Saturday night really quickly? Because I know we haven't convened since then, but before Mike Brown becomes official, it was a bit surreal to see Vivek and his daughter sitting courtside.
Oh my goodness, yes, I forgot about this. Yeah.
And look, people have to understand he goes to a lot of Warrior playoff games. Once the Lakers are done, as a former owner with the Warriors and so many business partnerships and things that he has,
he's got free time in the postseason usually.
Yeah, and hey, he's a basketball junkie, so but it was neat to see him there with both his finalists literally looking at each other across from different ways. One calling the game in Mark Jackson, and the other one, coaching the game in Mike Brown. And the weird part about it was, for me, I was like, all right, I'm going to storm this floor and see what I can talk to, because we didn't really have clarity at that point, and we knew that the interview process, at least with these gentlemen, had wrapped up. And so I come out on the floor, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm not trying to get anybody on camera necessarily, but maybe I can talk to somebody. And I was going to try to make it to Vivek first, but I see Mark Jackson is leaving the broadcast area. So by default, I'm going to go to Mark Jackson first. Got a big mask over his mouth, and it's a noisy venue because Chase Center the game literally just ended moments ago, and they're sweeping him off the floor. He tells me to walk with him after I introduced myself to him, and all I could make out were these words: "Had a great conversation." Mumble, 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 because I can't hear anything. And then he says, "We'll see what happens." So at that point, he felt he was still in the running. I don't know what was said in between because I couldn't really hear him. But then I tried to make it to Vivek, and that guy disappeared. So wasn't able to find him.
Vivek has an Acme hole like hiding in his back pocket. And anytime he sees a camera, he like pulls it out of his back pocket, throws it on the floor. He says, "Have you met my friend Roger Craig?" And boom, he jumps through the hole.
Yep.
He's gone. Yeah.
Disappearing act.
He's elusive.
So he was very elusive, and I wasn't able to catch up with him. But I will say this, I know Sam Amick had reported this. I had a little notion of it, but I didn't report it because I was just kind of holding on to it. But Sam had reported that, no decision had been made, but there was no offer. Neither side had really heard that Vivek was going to be there. I wasn't necessarily buying that, but I didn't see him go up at any point and talk to Mike Brown or even Mark Jackson. So it was a bit of an interesting scene. And then yes, the very next day, Mother's Day, as you mentioned, the news comes out. So that all kind of sets up what happened last night as we record this on what happened in Monday's Game 4, which is interesting. So I'd love for you to play those comments, James, because the way things kind of played out in that game, I think were just equally as interesting.
All right, let's play Mike Brown, which just so you know, it's only about 50 seconds long, and there's only one question about the Kings, but then we left a little bit extra on there so you can actually see a little bit of his personality.
You probably don't want to answer this question. You want to talk about this team, but you're up there. Why was the Kings the right opportunity, the right moment for you? And are you going to miss some of this too?
But just to be fair to their organization, I and our organization right now, I want to focus on this. And when the press conference comes, I'll answer any question that you want me to answer. But we got a lot of jokesters on the team, and I'm okay with it.
Mike, I don't know if this is too early to ask, but is it definitive that you'll be wearing the head coaching hat for Game 5, or it's in theory does Steve have enough time to do protocols to join you guys in Memphis?
Steve, if you're watching, get healthy quick. I don't know.
Sean, take it away.
So the fun part before that happened post-game. And just to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, Steve Kerr actually spoke at the morning shoot-around. The past few days, he had actually been wearing a mask again and had a little bit of a scratchy voice, but everything had, still been on the up and up, no positive tests or anything like that. And then I get to the game, and he was at morning shoot-around. He had addressed the Mike Brown hiring and couldn't be more thrilled for Mike Brown and what he's going to bring to Sacramento. And it's just another guy off his staff that he deeply, deeply cares about. And he says that's the goal, to get your assistants head coaching jobs in this league is the goal. And he thinks that while it's going to be a monumental loss for the Warriors, Sacramento gained a great one in terms of, especially with what he brought to the defensive end and just being a associate head coach to Steve since 2016 in this dynasty run, right? But the interesting part about it was he said that in the morning, and an hour before his pregame media availability at 5:15, I'm talking to Warriors PR, and they were going to set me up with Steve one-on-one for like a 2 or 3 question chat about Mike Brown, since he's already talked about it in the shoot-around. Didn't want to bog it down with the pregame media availability. All these other people have a playoff series to talk about, and I just wanted to talk about the Kings, obviously. So that's how quickly this thing turned, because we're in position to talk to Steve. We're waiting for him to come to the media room. 5:15 rolls around. Steve's usually really right on time, And then all of a sudden, one of the PR guys comes out and says, like, looks at me like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, I kind of told him the situation, and he says, "Yeah, I think that may have changed." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" And boom, then we get the word that Steve, in fact, entered health and safety protocols for COVID, and Mike Brown would be taking over and coaching his first game on the day that he's announced as Sacramento Kings head coach, and it becomes official. Funny part is, though, usually now Mike Brown would step into that pregame media session, and that didn't happen because Mike Brown was not at Chase Center yet. He had not entered the building yet at 5:15. So no media availability for Mike Brown before the game. I had already been told that Mike Brown was not going to speak about the Kings situation until there was a press conference. So we already had that going in. However, once Mike Brown was now coaching the game last night and, admirably coaches them to a victory in Game 4 to take that 3-1 series lead. And also, guys, I mean, I wanted to point this out. Like, this makes him, I think, 12-0 now in the playoffs, filling in for Steve Kerr when Steve Kerr isn't there. And that's just playoffs alone. 12-0 in the playoffs while filling in for Steve Kerr with the Warriors in the playoffs alone. Gets that 12th victory. He's talking post-game, and he's asked about it. I mean, it's a whirlwind day for him, and it's a very ironic day for him. And also, he's so close with Draymond Green, and what Draymond Green was going through with the loss of a former teammate at Michigan State yesterday, I think he was very sympathetic to as well. But essentially, if you heard that soundbite saying that an emotional day for him, and one that he'll be happy to talk all about the Kings, but not until the press conference comes. So he's going to keep that on the back burner until either this series is over or potentially the Warriors' playoff run is over.
Yeah, everything I've been hearing is that they'll wait until the end of the Warriors' playoff run, whenever that is. But like Sean pointed out, there are going to be gaps. It does look like there could be gaps between their series ending and the other Western Conference series ending. The thing that always stands out, like every time you see Mike Brown, he is smiling. He has a good spirit about him, and it's something that I think there's going to be a discussion around him and whether or not he is. We already heard it. Like I didn't listen to the whole clip, but Matt Barnes talked about it on D'Lo and Casey yesterday about Mike being, pretty easygoing and maybe not being like the authoritarian that some people think that the Kings need. But I think that there are a lot of ways to coach, and I honestly think that he's a really good fit. Brenden, what was your kind of takeaway from watching some of the clip and all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, he seems like a fun personality to be interacting with. Like, reminded me a little bit of Alvin Gentry. I've said it before. I thought Alvin was really fun to cover and just interact with as often as we did. And Mike Brown looks like he'll be similar. Like, I like that you included that little bit at the end of him looking at the camera and joking around Steve Kerr come back as soon as possible. I think that type of stuff just selfishly makes it pretty fun to be around a guy like that. And I think that type of stuff like translates to the players enjoying being around a guy like that, as long as it's also leading to some success and progress on the floor. And I think that the defensive meticulousness and accountability that Mike Brown is kind of known for could do well for the Kings. I'm curious with the roster that they're working with, because as Sean pointed out, talent is ultimately what matters most in this league. And I'm not all too confident in their defensive talent, but I think there is potential there, and there's ways to improve the roster on that end of the floor. And, the 200-page game plans that are color-coded and figuring out just each specific scenario of what the game plan is and being on the same page. And I think I mentioned on the last episode, to me, so much of accountability is and trusting the guy next to you and culture shows on the defensive end. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of that. And I'm curious what it looks like on the offensive end as well, because he was in charge of a lot of the Warriors' offense during that 6-year run until most recently he kind of transitioned over to the focus more on the defensive side. And when he was in LA, he was kind of running a Princeton offense that was similar to what we saw Dave Yeager run for a little while he was here. And I don't know, Jaeger's half-court offense wasn't the most inspiring, but Sabonis is a guy that works better in that offense than Harry Giles or Willie Cauley-Stein. So I'm kind of curious to see how he works with all these pieces. And on the topic of like there just needing to be more talent, how involved do you guys think Mike Brown should be in these offseason moves? Like, is there more of an aspect of maybe him being on the same page with the front office now that this is the first time Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox are choosing who their head coach is?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think the biggest issue that we have now is like, how do you build out the roster? I mean, you got the one thing done that you had to get done early in the offseason, which was hire a new coach. Now, I was asked a question yesterday on the radio. Do you think that the Kings are going to look at different types of players now that you have Mike Brown as your head coach? And I don't think so. I don't think that that changes at all. I think that you're still looking for long, athletic, three-point shooting wings and defenders, which is how this team should be building itself around Sabonis and Fox. But I definitely think that his ability to have guys follow him on the defensive end it's one of the aspects of him as a coach that I really like. You talk about him like doing some of the offensive things here in the last couple of years with the Warriors, but really he hangs his hat on the defensive end. And I think it's really good for the Kings to have a defensive person who's running the entire show. It's one thing to have good, solid defensive coaches. It's another thing to have a coach who is your head coach that is known for one specific thing. And so I think that that's a good thing. And I think it also, like, getting NBA players to buy in on the defensive end is one of the most difficult things there is to do. All of these guys were like premium athletes their entire careers. They've always been the top scorers on their teams from the time that they were little until the time that they're, however many years through college and everything else. They've always been the guy. And getting the buy-in is something that is really hard to do. I mean, we've watched it unfold in Sacramento where no one can get the buy-in on the defensive end. And the fact that Mike Brown has consistently been able to get buy-in, that shows me that he has a leadership quality that maybe people are overlooking, because he is getting guys to actually focus on one of the toughest things in the game, which is defense, and 100% buy-in, because that's how you get, I mean, what was it this year? They were the Golden State Warriors were first in defensive rating. I mean, that's incredible, especially when you look at their roster. Sure, they have Draymond Green. They don't have a natural shot blocker. They don't have a 7-footer, really. They have injuries all over the place. They got Klay Thompson, coming back after a full 2-year absence. You got Iguodala playing like a couple of minutes here and there. I'm like, this team, really, how in the world were the Golden State Warriors the number 1 rated defense in the league? And that's about buy-in. That's about like listening to a coach, taking what he has to offer and using it to your advantage on the court. And so that's one of the ways that I would kind of look at, how we're going to transition and move forward.
Yeah, and I'd say this too. I feel like, especially for a guy who's known for such structure, it's interesting to hear Matt say that, and I respect their opinion of what Matt Barnes said on 1320. But I would say, like, I feel like you can have both. I know for a guy who has such structure, I feel like the disciplinarian will come out. Maybe he'll have to rely so much more on his staff. I feel like that's not going to be so much of a problem. I said this on the air on Channel 40 the other day. It was, if you're a player in a Mike Brown system, get ready to work. No slight on any other coaches that we've had here in Sacramento in this recent era, but Mike Brown is very much a teacher. He's very much someone that's going to go through a lot of scheme, and I think practices will look a little bit different. There's also a sense of physicality that comes with a lot of Mike Brown teams as well that I've been pleasantly surprised with. I think in today's game you have to play physical, but I think what the problem is with a lot of young teams is when you play physical, you foul a lot, and that's been a real Achilles heel for the Kings. So, and in terms of the draft stuff, I don't know how active he'll be there. I'm sure he'll be able to voice some opinions. But with the Warriors' run probably going into June at this point, or at least poised to, I don't think that it really matters. I think he can certainly have some input there, but that's really going to fall on Monty and West to be able to get the right person with whatever pick they end up, or if they end up moving it. And I think if they end up moving it, that's ultimately maybe where Mike becomes a little bit more involved in voicing some of his things that he'd like to see in players brought in and personnel that's brought in. So, but in the meantime, he's just got his attention elsewhere, and it's going to be that way for a little while, it looks like.
Yeah, I'd imagine also the guys that Monty and Wes have brought in within the last year and a half, 2 years, are guys that, in my mind, are Mike Brown type of players, like guys that are bought in on the defensive end, giving all out effort there. When you think of Davion Mitchell, Dante DiVincenzo, if you want to throw like a Nemish Keita in there, like I feel like we've seen them put a priority on adding defensive talent and guys that are engaged and focused on that end of the floor, kind of difference makers that fit what in my mind like a Mike Brown type of player would be. I think like a passing big with Sabonis also kind of fits that on the offensive end. So I think that they already kind of are working towards the same goal. And I do like that they obviously went with a defensive focused guy. Hopefully there's obviously a lot of room for improvement there, even from your top guys with Fox and Sabonis. Curious to see how that duo kind of works in pick and roll coverage and the way that they go about that. How long do you guys think it takes to fill out the rest of this staff, roughly?
I think it's an interesting question because we don't even know what's going to happen with the current assistants. So, I mean, I checked in this week. They still have heard nothing, which you wouldn't expect them to hear. Like, Mike Brown's not going to call them day one and say, hey, you're fired, or hey, you're staying. He's going to want to do interviews. He's going to want to look at a lot of guys that he worked with in the past. He's gonna try to build out a staff that that is reflective of what he needs, right? So it's not just, we're not going to see him bring in like all defensive guys. I mean, he needs an offensive like mastermind behind the scenes as well, to help support him. And I think he's one of those guys that you do understand that he does know what he knows and he doesn't know, and what he doesn't know, he knows that he doesn't know, right? If that makes sense. So I expect him to bring in some savvy veterans. I also I wouldn't doubt that maybe Steve Kerr lets him take an assistant or a guy there from Golden State with him. I don't know. Like Chris DeMarco is a guy that has come up in the past here in Sacramento, that actually almost took a job here in Sacramento before things went a different direction. I know that for a fact. But I also think there are other guys that we're going to hear brought up. And, I've heard Melvin Hunt, who is a guy that worked with Mike quite a few times in the past. Sean, are you hearing guys as well?
Not so much hearing, but I feel like there will definitely be somebody of head coaching experience, at least as his number one or possibly a number two there, an associate head coach, if you will. I think that's just pretty valuable these days for most places. But I also feel that the player development side is going to be pretty crucial there. And I look at someone like Phil Handy, who's been with him before. Obviously, his tenure has just kind of come to an end with the Lakers on Frank Vogel's staff. And I know he has aspirations of being a head coach. That could be something that could pop up as well. But Mike Brown has no shortage of people that want to work with him. And I feel like he's already brought a number of those names to the table in his negotiations with Sacramento. So I think he's got a pretty keen idea of who he wants to bring with him. And I would imagine he's got most of that kind of already situated. I would just say that, however, some of the other assistants and player development people possibly having a holdover or two from the previous regime could be possible. But Mike Brown is revered in this league from a coaching standpoint, and there's a lot of people that like to work with him, and people that have worked with him have gone on to be head coaches themselves. So I'm very interested to see what the staff looks like. But at the end of the day, that's something that could even draw well into the summer. I mean, you might be there might be additions. We've seen it before, James, where, we see additions later in July and August and September. So it's an evolving process for sure, and one that, if I'm Mike Brown and if everything that I know about him being true, structure, OCD on steroids, I would bet that he'd have his staff wrapped up on the quicker end rather than the longer drawn out end.
Is there anyone? Is there anything that you think he needs to really focus on with his staff, Sean? Is there someone that you think, like, man, like if he could get this guy, it would be tremendous?
Well, someone he's worked with before, like Steve Clifford, I think he was obviously a finalist, and I kind of drew a comparison of the Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox thing when they were finalists for the GM job, and they came over as a duo. Obviously, with Clifford being somebody who has worked with Mike in the past, I think that could be something that makes a lot of sense. I don't know that it'll happen. I don't have any insight there because I think Steve Clifford's going to have a number of opportunities, even beyond the one he currently holds. So, but I feel like something, again, kind of going back to that, you're going to need a lot of, I think, exuberance and youth, especially if you do go with someone like Steve Clifford, who's a little bit longer in the tooth. But just a lot of diversity in not only your personnel, but in thought process. I think everyone's on the same page, and it has to be on that string. But I think diversifying thoughts and philosophies and techniques and all that thing, I think only helps strengthen your core of your team. And I think you can look really, I know Kings fans might cringe, but you only look down the road with the Warriors. Steve Kerr's staff has always had a great sense of diversity among philosophies, personnel, and the way they just relate to players. I think you have a good mixture of young and old. You have a good mixture of people with head coaching experience, and then you have a lot of people who are just, revered in the game, who bring something different to the table that might be a little outside the box. But the personality of the team is very, very consistent and high character. So there might be a little bit of a loose feeling there based on the success that Steve Kerr and the Warriors have enjoyed, and that might be a little bit buttoned up a little bit more here in Sacramento over the first year or two as they try to even experience a little bit of that success. But I think a lot of that will try to mimic what he's had on previous staffs for sure.
Brenden, do you have any concerns?
Like when it comes to the rest of the coaching staff and building it out?
Well, that and Mike Brown in general, just like him and like how he will put this thing together. But really, like, do you have any concerns that stand out that you're like, I hope this thing kind of gets taken care of, or I hope he helps himself in this way?
I mean, I think the roster still needs to be dramatically improved. That's probably the one standout to me. Like, I'm still thinking that the Kings need to make another pretty big move. Whether that's, we're a week away right now from the draft lottery, would shock me when I looked it up today. If they jump into top 4, maybe that's the big move that you luck into. But I still think that there needs to be more added to this roster for Mike Brown and the new coaching staff to work with. I think that will, because I'm expecting even more adjustment to the roster, I think that that'll lead to there being a little bit of a transition period at the beginning of next season. But kind of on that same topic, I wanted to ask you guys, and I guess this works as I got to get this voice down, the business of basketball.
Oh,
so, yeah, I don't got it.
You did.
The business of basketball. Okay, we're ready. What do you got for us?
The Jedi versus the Padawan right there.
There we go.
From all the other coaching staffs that you guys have covered, I want to say it's double digits for both of you guys. Do you feel like it's fair to say that there's an expected kind of transition and just tough phase at the beginning here as we get used to new schemes, new things being implemented, just a new style for all these players, and also considering, like I said, I think there will probably be a little bit of change up to the roster that'll impact that as well. But, we saw it with Udoka in Boston. They got off to a tough start, but then things eventually click. Like Willie Green in New Orleans this year kind of falls into the same thing. From your guys' experience, are you kind of expecting a little bit of a growing pain at the beginning of this year?
Go ahead, James, because I'm going to think about that for a second.
Growing pains. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to say this. Like Luke Walton said this all the time. We're going to go as far as De'Aaron Fox takes us. Dave Yeager said the same thing all the time. We're going to go as far as De'Aaron Fox takes us. I think De'Aaron Fox learned a harsh lesson coming into last season, and whether it was mentally or physically or whatever it was, he wasn't ready, and he quickly went from one of the best up and coming young guards in the NBA to someone who's left out of like the top 25 under 25, or the top 10 under 25. And that's something that I hope he realizes and takes to heart. If he does, and he understands how big he is to this entire thing, then I don't think the Kings have the lag early in the season that they have in the past. I think they're going to have plenty of conversations this summer about defensive schemes and about what Mike Brown brings to the table and about what the expectations are. But at the end of the day, talent wins out every single time. And I think Fox has the talent to be an elite star in this league, but he has to do it for 82 games. It can't be he takes 20 games to warm up and figure out what's going on, and by that time the Kings are, 7-13 or 6-14, and their season's already shot, and you're basically trying to make up a 20-point lead in the fourth quarter. And so I think that we're going to see a different Fox. I think having Sabonis here is going to help have a different Fox. But also, I really do think that if you can get that going the right way early on, then you can start building out some of these principles when it comes to defense and everything else. So I don't think that there will be a huge lag like there has been in the past. At least I hope not. And I hope that Fox has really taken this to heart the way that last season played out and comes in ready to absolutely kill it and have his name in contention for an all-star spot.
I would say that I don't think there's a blueprint per se. You mentioned some organizations there, Brenden, especially in Boston, who have experienced a great deal of success. And there's a culture there. And I know that's the cliche of changing the culture. You hear that so often. But you don't really have to change the culture within the locker room. Certainly you want to change the losing mentality and turn yourself into a winner. But to me, I think that begins with the front office. James, you and I think all three of us on the same page with the whole talent wins out. The pressure is now on Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox, Vivek Ranadive, that whole brain trust. You need to get the talent, and I think if you're changing a culture, look, let's pretend that Mike Brown misses the playoffs next year, losing record, which I would point out he's only really had one losing record in his old time as a coach. I know the 1-5 season with the Lakers, or 1-4. That doesn't. I don't know if I'm really. Kobe gave him that look, and it was done. We have that famous look.
I thought 17 games was short. I don't know.
Right. But you talk about culture, and I think if missing the playoffs, and let's say you go into season 2, and as James mentioned, you have a 7-15 record, whatever that is. I think fans are now accustomed to, all right, well, they're going to pull the trigger, they're going to get rid of them. They're going to make a change, interim head coach, and we spiral down that rabbit hole again. You have to have, at some point, some stability. And maybe at that point, if you have a winning or a losing record that way, that's when you have to turn your attention, I think, to more of your front office and what you're doing with the talent that you're bringing in. Because, again, I talked about it a minute ago, you're not going to find many head coaches that are more experienced than Mike Brown. I have joked in the past you could bring Phil Jackson in his prime, Greg Popovich in his prime, Red Auerbach in his prime, and put him in Sacramento in any of these last few years. You might have a little bit of a different record, maybe a few more wins, but I'm still not convinced you've got a playoff team in any of these. I think when we famously had that podcast, James, where we went back and said, when's the last time, we really felt that they were going to make the playoffs? For me, I have to see it first. Like, I never predict this team to make the playoffs. I just don't. If you're one of those betting type of people, which I really am not, but maybe it's just I'm a little bit more guarded when it comes to things like that. I know some people spout off, oh, they're going to win 40 games this year. That's where I see them. And I'm like, go, what gives you any indication that they're going to do that? You haven't even seen that. Like they have, the 39 under Dave Yeager the 1 year, and they still didn't make it. And I know people were up in arms that they didn't make the 40 win. But the point being, that's just a long rambling way of just saying you have to have the stability. Hopefully, Mike Brown is not replaced in 2 years, even if the record isn't there yet, or 3 years. You just show this team and this culture that you're having a coach here that you believe in that's going to be here for the next few years. Now, short of him doing something just completely crazy to where everything has shifted and turned on its ear and he's lost the locker room, that could be a different conversation. But showing the stability, I think will mean, look, there's no honeymoon period, there's no grace period, but but you give Mike Brown the keys to lead your franchise, and everybody else has to have that pressure on them. Mike Brown, well, it's a results it's a results industry. You got to have the results, and it is a business. But I feel like the pressure should be on other people than the new head coach.
Hang on, I want to add something to that. Monty and Wes need new contracts to coincide with the Mike Brown era, and that hasn't happened yet. From everything I've been told, it hasn't happened. So I'm just going to say that that's the other element here. When Sean talks about stability, it's got to be stability with all of them. Like, give this group the leeway. They made a franchise-altering trade. It changed everything. Everything can be different if you do it right. Give them the leeway. I'm willing to take that first really small offseason that Monty McNair had. I mean, I think he was hired on September 17th. And then people remember, like, coming out of the bubble, you didn't have, we didn't have a natural, like, offseason at all. What we had was, like, the draft one day and free agency started, like, 2 days later. I think the draft was on a Thursday. Kings traded for Tristan Thompson on a Wednesday. The draft was on a Thursday. Free agency started Saturday morning. And so it was boom, boom, boom. And he sat out that first one. And I don't like giving people, like, hey, you did nothing in an offseason. Like, to me, like Glenn Robinson III and Hassan Whiteside, that's like almost doing nothing. But then we saw him make trades at the deadline. We saw him make a really good draft pick. We saw him, going into the next summer, try to bolster his core, and that didn't work out. But I think what we've seen now is that, like, he is able to go swing for the fences. So let's give him the leeway, and also let's not keep doing the same thing where you have a head coach and a GM that are on different timelines. This is Monty's hire. Let him be here for the duration of the Mike Brown era here in the beginning, whether that's 4 years or it gets extended or it ends up at 3 years, whatever it might be. We got to break this cycle where Sacramento, for a lot of coaches, should be the best job in the league because you get paid 4 years for doing work for 2. And that's just, it's a nice little 2-for-1 you get. And that's not the way it should be. And so I think that's the next step here that we need to see is the stability of locking down the front office and Monty and Wes and giving them the opportunity to see this thing through. There is no more Joe Dumars. There's no more Ken Catanella. Like, it really is shrunk down to 2 guys and Vivek, like, moving forward. And I think that's, you need to cement that. You need to kind of support that by paying these guys and locking them up.
Yeah, I think the jury's still out on Monty and Wes and how they are as general managers. Like, I think it's pretty easy to present the argument either way on if you believe in them and the moves that they've done, or if you're skeptical of the moves that have taken place. But the reality of, like you're saying, they just brought in a head coach that is somebody that those 2 guys want. And you allowed him to make a trade, them to make a trade that drastically altered the direction of the franchise with Halliburton and Sabonis. Like, you can't allow a front office to make a move like that and not see it through. So that's why I'm with you. I'm still a little up in the air on how I feel about Monty and Wes and the job that they've done as general managers. But I think that for those reasons, I'm with you. It makes sense to get those guys on the same page here. And I can't help but laugh at how much I've heard continuity these past 2-3 years. I can only imagine your guys'
Consistency, continuity, yes.
I also feel, too, that I can paint a picture here of, I think you can get to September and you can decide, okay, whether or not you're going to extend them, whether you're not going to let them go into the I think there's a difference in having your front office people go in to a final year of a contract with no with nothing guaranteed beyond the season, a lame duck, so to speak. I do feel it's different in coaching because you have the locker room. You need to show you need to show the locker room that the organization has their support. You don't necessarily have to do that with your front office people. I know they'd probably backhand. They'd be like, "Shut up, Sean," because they'd want the stability and they'd want the guarantee. That being said, if it doesn't happen, and what James talked about, that whole vicious cycle that we see where the coach is gone, the GM's gone, and it's somebody they didn't hire and all that. I could also see another option of that, if you will, where maybe one of them is gone and the other one's still here to show a little bit of that stability, and maybe they go out and get another tandem, another think trust where they have like another, maybe you elevate one of them to a general manager or a president of basketball operations, whatever you want to call it, some fancy title, and then you bring in some other pieces to replace a Monty or a Wes, depending upon which one you wanted to keep, to try to keep some of that continuity, but also bring in something that maybe just wasn't there yet, to hold yourself accountable in a different way. So that way you don't have to say, well, they didn't pick the coach. And look, ultimately Vivek and whoever was the holdover would still had power over picking that head coach and Mike Brown. And also anybody that you hire would have to be more than comfortable with Mike Brown as their head coach. So it's not the most ideal situation. I think in a perfect world, yeah, James, you're absolutely right. Pick up those, if there's an option out there to be had or extend them. I think I'm not telling anything anybody doesn't know. I mean, this is a front office that isn't necessarily the highest paid in the league. So I don't think that the money is going to be much of an issue. And even if it gets to a point where that gives them more peace to be able to do their job, at any point you want to shift gears, you can certainly do that. And it's not going to, be anything that's going to really attack the pocketbook very much. You've shown the ability to not be this frugal franchise and shown the ability to pay people not to be here. So if ultimately you have to go to that crossroad, you do it. But if you do feel that helps your organization in the best way possible, and it's just better business to do so, then yeah, do it.
Yeah, and I'll make the distinction. We kind of muddied these guys together, but like Monty is a GM and Wes is the assistant GM. They're on somewhat of equal footing in plenty of ways, but and they have split duties. Like they've broken up the duties there behind the scenes. But Monty's still the guy who actually makes the final decision. He is the guy. I would like at some point one of them to be elevated to, sort of that next step, the president of basketball operations, and then have the next step be the general manager, and then maybe an assistant GM. But it does feel like
they still need a chief strategy officer too.
Oh no, Brenden.
That could be you, Brenden.
Let's do it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I think like Jason Thompson is available because if you're just going to go with former Kings that you bring in and have them so get JT or maybe Luther Head. Luther Head's out there somewhere. I'm sure. Luther
James,
Head.
what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
That's been the problem the whole time. What are we doing? And the answer is amassing losses, Sean. That's what the answer is. I'm going to ask this question. We talk about how the Kings roster has to be somewhat like they need more, clearly. We all know that, right? But do you think Mike Brown gets a sort of a bum rap for what he did in Cleveland the first time around? Because I went back and looked at those rosters, and sure, you had young LeBron James, but when Mike Brown took over, LeBron James was 22 years old, and that team was trash. Like outside of LeBron James, we're talking about like Larry Hughes is his number 2, and Zydrunas Ilgauskas averaging like less than 14 points a game is like their 3rd leading scorer. And like, there was not a lot there. Even when they went to the finals in his 2nd season as head coach, I mean, that team was bad. I mean, outside of LeBron James, it's bad. And, I'm not going to say that De'Aaron Fox, the combination of De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis are better than LeBron James. I'm not going to be silly and say something like that. But at the same time, like what Mike Brown was able to do with like lesser talent was pretty impressive. I think the second, like the best player that or highest scoring player that LeBron played with during Mike Brown's 5 years there was Mo Williams, averaging like 17.8 points per game. Like at some point, you have to like give him props for getting a marginal team with one superstar all the way to the NBA Finals and to 60 win seasons and like quality years.
Yeah, I mean the bum rap might be there, but it's the again, it's because he had a superstar, and it's kind of what I was hearkening back to in the beginning of this podcast, which I mean, you have some nice pieces in Sacramento. You don't have a superstar. You have an all-star, somebody who's had all-star type number. I was talking to somebody the other day, and when it comes to like somebody like Domantas Sabonis, he doesn't need to make the all-star team again. He can just put up all-star type numbers. And if you think back of like DeMarcus Cousins before he actually became an all-star, James, he had that insane season where he just put up incredible numbers. The team was trash. They were not winning. And conversely, he didn't make the all-star team, but he put up some incredible numbers. And that's, if you can have that type of output, that's fantastic. But I think it gets the bum rap, James, because of the fact that he had that superstar. And that's what I think over here in Sacramento, there's a I don't want to call it a pressure or relief of pressure, but not having a true superstar on your team, or even maybe to the fact of where you have a budding superstar, and I don't think that is the case with De'Aaron Fox at all. I wouldn't call him a superstar, but maybe a budding all-star. Kind of takes some of that pressure off because you don't have a LeBron who he had to coach. You don't have a Kobe who he had to coach. I mean, having those types of players puts in a, I mean, look, it's a luxury because talent wins out, but it also puts a lot of pressure on your shoulders. So you can have a 41 and whatever season it was with the Lakers with Kobe Bryant that first year, but the next year when you're 1-5 and there's some friction there because you have a structured system and Kobe is the type of player that he is, you find yourself out on your ass because you just, it's a star-driven league. So this could be a better situation. If you look, honestly, and then you look at Memphis, right? They have a budding superstar in Ja Morant. But he came up through that system and wasn't a star right away. He was a heralded pick, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't a LeBron James. And I think, we were having conversations 2 years ago. Ja Morant, De'Aaron Fox, Lonzo Ball, like all those were kind of in the same category as who's going to take that leap. Clearly it was Ja Morant. So Taylor Jenkins has had the ability to be there for a good portion of that and bring him up. Whereas when Mike Brown got LeBron James was a bad MF in this league and was as a superstar and one of the faces of the whole NBA.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's the complications of working with a superstar or superstars like Sean pointed out, but I think it also makes it a little easier in ways when it comes to just scheming of like, okay, we're optimizing this guy and how can everybody complement this one specific star. And I think that Fox Sabonis is like a pretty tough pairing to optimize. Both guys don't shoot very well. I think that they both have shown flashes there, and like I'm optimistic that they can improve, but they do both need to. I don't think it's like a very obvious defensive fit between those two. Like, as much as I think there is potential for them to be like one of the better two-man games in the league, I think that there are still a lot of ways in my mind where they kind of are questionable as a pairing. So I think it's going to be interesting to kind of see how he works to optimize those two and what the surrounding pieces are. Like you point at Memphis, like Ja is obviously phenomenal, and I sound crazy. I don't know that I think Fox is like super far off from Ja Morant. Ja's obviously the better player, but like I still do think really highly of Fox. And like you said, it wasn't that long ago we were having a conversation of those guys being kind of neck and neck. And it's the surrounding pieces. Like, it's the culture that's already in place. It's like, look at the record that they have when Ja's not out there, because they still are just phenomenal defensively and fitting around that one specific star compared to fitting around a pairing. Because while it's easy to look at like Sacramento's roster and see where they have talent that's promising, where I get lost is that it's all relative. Like, you look at the other rosters that's surrounding the bottom of the Western Conference in this play-in, like, all of these rosters are extremely talented. So like, looking at Sacramento's by itself is impressive, but then when you're talking about like the Lakers are one seed above them last year, and obviously the talent that's on that team, the Clippers are going to be getting back Kawhi, the Pelicans could be getting back Zion Williamson. Like, to me, an optimal outcome for the Kings is maybe like what we saw with Minnesota, like a 7th seed. And maybe that's kind of if everything goes right. So definitely optimistic, since we've seen Mike Brown work with lesser talented rosters, kind of like what we talked about with Cleveland, with LeBron being the clear outlier there. But yeah, I mean, it's tough when I look at the rest of the competition in the West, because there's a lot of really talented teams that are well coached and have even more potential for internal growth with some of these young guys.
And Brenden, when Mike Brown, that 2013-14 season, when he went back to the Cavs, I don't think people remember, like, that was before LeBron returned to Cleveland, right? So that was Kyrie's second year. You have guys like Anthony Bennett, who was famously taken, number 1, and that was his rookie season. You've got, Andrew Bynum, Seth Curry, Dellavedova, Luol Deng, who's in his 9th year.
Deion Waiters.
Yeah, I mean, just going down that roster, granted that was Tristan Thompson's second year, and obviously we know what happened there, but like it's not a good team. Spencer Hawes on that team, by the way. Not a great team. Still won 33 games, but he only lasted the 1 year there, before getting out. So LeBron comes in, and I think he replaced Byron Scott, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You might have to check me on that, but
He did.
Interestingly enough, like, that was his lone losing season. And so that could be very much a precursor to what you might see here, depending upon what this roster looks like. Maybe that's very similar to what, if Sacramento doesn't get the talent in that first year, you're wondering what it looks like. Maybe it's something similar to that.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the Kings are much more talented than that roster, if you really break it down. Like, they have higher end talent. They have higher ceiling guys. They don't have like a guy like Waiters, who like I was told, like, one of the worst teammates in the history of the game, like, just not a good teammate. So you didn't have a distraction. They're not going to walk into the season as of right now with like a major distraction type player. And, when I look at, we talk about some of these teams, right, that are around the Kings, the thing that Memphis doesn't have just so much more talent than the Kings. They just have an identity. They do. I mean, they have a next man up mentality. I mean, if you're telling me that like Kyle Anderson is so much better than, I don't know, Trey Lyles, like, sure, he's a better player, but is he so much better? And you go position by position, they've done a good job of bringing young players up, of supporting guys like Desmond Bane, who all of a sudden steps up and becomes a really good player, of finding guys like Dylan Brooks in the second round, and again, fostering that putting him in a situation to succeed and really having him succeed. Certain guys there, they come in, they go, they kind of like hit their peak, and but overall, it's a mindset that they have, and that's where I thought the Kings were really falling behind. They're falling behind because they're not establishing the culture. They're not establishing like how a franchise is supposed to be run and pushing forward and sticking to a plan. When I see Memphis, I see a franchise that it almost doesn't really matter like who is playing from one night to the next. You're going to get the same exact mentality.
James, they're 20-5 without Ja Morant.
Incredible.
It's mind blowing. And you look
Yeah.
at even last night, not to go back to that Warrior game, but like Steven Adams hadn't played in the series. He played in garbage minutes in Saturday's game. First time we've seen him in the playoffs, and all of a sudden here he is, and then he starts in Game 4 without Ja Morant. They changed things up a little bit. Their defense was insane. Adams was fantastic, and there wasn't a point in that game that I thought that the Warriors would win the game early on. By third quarter, I had completely shifted. The way they had defended and played as a unit, they were beating up the Warriors, and it just so happens that the Warriors down the stretch, you put Steph Curry at the free throw line, he's going to hit free throws, so that's how they pull out, and all of a sudden they weren't able to make a shot down the stretch. So that's just the way it was. But for a good portion of that game, Memphis looked like they had the game. Again, 20-5 without Ja Morant, and they very easily could have been 21-4, going to Memphis for Game 5 here. So just incredible that a team is able to do that without their superstar, and how much they rely on Ja Morant, and how differently that they play with Ja Morant as a offensive player, but defensively you wouldn't notice that he wasn't on the floor.
It's about culture. Go ahead, Brenden.
It is. I think that it is about culture, but I would also kind of fight back a little bit that I think Memphis is a lot more talented on the defensive end. I think that it is about buy-in and culture. That's a big aspect. Like Sacramento can drastically improve with the roster that they're working with now. But I don't know. I do think Memphis has some really good defenders on their roster and capable three-point shooters. They have smart players. Like, they don't have any Buddy Hields or Marvin Bagleys. And I know the Kings aren't working with that anymore. But I do think that they have some really nice pieces when it comes to the marginal complementary players. And that's kind of what we need to see Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox fill out Sacramento's roster with. And I do think they need another guy at the top to kind of fill out the starting lineup as well here in Sacramento. But I think it's a little bit of a combination of both. And is there more pressure this season than there was at the beginning of last year?
No.
No?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, at this point, you already own the record for the longest playoff drought in NBA history. Like, I would like to say that there's pressure to win. Certainly, like, Mike Brown is a win now move, but it's a win now move that should be win now, 10 years from now as well. Like, if it all works out.
I think you have to define the pressure, like, for who. Like I said,
it's
I think the pressure
to me.
Well, I think the pressure's on. I think the pressure's on the front office because they went after Sabonis, but now Sabonis is playing with a new coach, so he's playing with a second coach. Like, to me, again, the pressure. I don't think it's any bigger in the sense in the basketball. The pressure could be on De'Aaron Fox because you haven't seen him in the playoffs. Again, like I think these are things you take into account. But again, you have to find the right talent. But to me, I don't think it's on Mike Brown. I won't think it's on necessarily this team because here we are May 10th, gentlemen, and we still don't know who the hell's going to be on this team yet. So you've got a 7th pick likely in the draft. That could very well be a nice trade chip and probably will be because they've shown that they're looking to contend for the playoffs right now. They're not looking in trying to rebuild. It's a soft rebuild because you're adding pieces that are in the now, in the primes of their career. And you're right. You're talking about basketball IQ. I completely agree. I think they have gotten a lot smarter. I also think with the addition of Mike Brown, with this structure, especially being under coaches like Popovich, Carlisle, Steve Kerr for the past, however many years in this dynasty era, on the offensive end, that ball had better freaking move. I cannot tell you how much it drives me crazy to see the Kings dribble the hell out of the basketball, move the ball. That ball has to move. And you look at, what you talked about Memphis. Yes, they're amazing defensively, but offensively they move the freaking ball as well, and that just has to be there. You have playmakers essentially at every single position. That's one of the things that the Warriors do so well. For as great as they are defensively, every player moves the ball. Every player is capable of being a playmaker. And if you can't replicate that, I don't see how you can turn that into success.
Yeah, I think the one interesting thing is we can go back to how the season ended, but every Kings player let a break. Like what Alvin Gentry did where he gave them carte blanche to go. Damian Jones dribbling down the court, Chimezie Metu leading a break. Like we saw these guys grabbing the ball and going. I think that if you can pull some of that idea, some of what we saw from Alvin and especially in the second half, I thought he was really creative when it came to Fox and Sabonis and what little sample size we saw. I hope that Mike has that in his playbook. The ability to push the tempo. His teams do typically play slower, and that's something that he's going to get pushed on. He's going to get pushed on because you have a Ferrari. You don't want to put it on blocks in De'Aaron Fox. And so I hope that they're able to surround him with the right pieces, but also, look, if you're a coach in the league, I think the most brilliant thing that we've seen from a head coach in Sacramento over the last 16 years was when Dave Yeager just looked at his roster and said, okay, we're going to sprint. We're just going to go, 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 go. Dave Yeager completely changed who he was as a coach in his final season in Sacramento and found great success. And if Mike Brown isn't able to do that, if he's not able to be versatile with, especially on the offensive end, then it's going to look clunky. And, there's nothing worse than a bad team that isn't interesting, right? And that's something he's going to have to make sure that his style of play isn't so structured and slow it down and focused on the defensive end that it's not fun. Because if the wins don't come, losing games and scoring in the 90s is not going to be something that anyone wants to watch. And so if there's one thing that I would point out that you got to worry about with Mike Brown, it's that he needs to take what he learned from Steve Kerr and put it in motion with, of course, lesser players, because the Kings don't have Steph and Clay and Draymond and all the guys that we see down there, even a Jordan Poole. You gotta figure out a way to
future king
Yeah.
Jordan Poole.
Oh Jesus, yeah, yeah. You see that coming, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, make a run at him. All right, so we got a couple of other things to cover. Steph threw some shade. I don't think he threw shade. I think it was taken. I watched him say what he said. I think he threw 5 sentences together that none of them had anything to do with each other. And when you put the 5 sentences in a paragraph, it looks like, oh, I think he threw shade. Brenden, you have the quote from Steph last night?
I do. It was right after they won that game, so kind of heat of the moment, and Steph's a little bit all over the place.
Can you do your best Steph Curry impression? Just for
I
us,
can.
the listening audience. Pressure's on, buddy. Pressure's on.
I don't know how to do this one. Steph's got he doesn't have a standout thing about his voice to replicate.
Can you do a Steph Curry quote using Homer Simpson's voice?
Yeah, that'd be even better.
Don't think so. I'm just going to go ahead and read this one.
Who's your best impression? Do it that way.
Do you have an impression?
I don't know if I do.
Go ahead, Brenden. I'm sorry. I totally
No,
agree.
you're okay.
No,
You're
we're
okay.
messing
I'll
with
prep
you.
for the next one. The quote from Steph right after the game is, you talk about historically bad shooting. A lot of history was made. He's been named head coach twice in 24 hours. I felt like we got traded to the Kings overnight. I don't know how to explain all this. We're obviously happy for him in his next gig. End quote. Pretty funny to see the Kings be the focal point of kind of socials and a lot of different talks around right after a playoff win. But I'm with you. I don't know how much of it was a shot at the Kings, or he's saying that we're a Mike Brown coach team, so I guess we're the Kings right now. He was kind of all over the place, but it was funny no matter.
Facts is facts and truth hurts. I mean, point to the lie. Where did he say point to the lie? I'm sorry. It's true.
Sean, sorry.
Canadian sorry.
Canadian, sorry.
I think he also said Klay Thompson was looking like Buddy Hield out there, but I don't know if that one.
How about
I
the
could have
line?
misheard it.
How about the line from Charles Barkley, which was, I think, at pregame or halftime? Someone might be able to. I saw it later because obviously wasn't watching. I was at the game, but him saying something about, "Hey, Mike Brown, you better win this game, or Sacramento may fire you." I mean, that's. I mean, comedic value totally there for Chuck, and I like it because it pokes fun at just the instability that we've seen.
Well, I mean, that's where the whole winning cures all. If you want to change
Right.
the narrative around you, then change the narrative by winning, and change the narrative the right way. And I hope that the Kings are on a path to start changing that narrative. I hope that Mike Brown is one of the guys that can actually help change that narrative. We have this weird thing on, what is today? Today is Tuesday. On Tuesday, the Sacramento Kings are bringing in, oh boy, I'm going to butcher this, Jaden Shackelford from Alabama. Johnny, is it Juzing from UCLA? I don't know how to say Lee from Davidson. I'm not even going to try his first name. Tyler Burton from Richmond, and Keon Brooks from Kentucky. Justin Mutz from Virginia Tech. So the Kings have started to bring in. These are all like late second, undrafted players, but the draft process has started, and it's funny because in past years, well, the COVID years have kind of messed with everything. Like in the Kyle Guy year, the Kyle Guy draft, the Kings brought in 101 prospects. Like 101 Dalmatians. Like they just kept bringing in draft prospects, and it was ridiculous because they bring them in sets of 6. And
Is
then Kyle
Vivek
Guy,
Cruella DeVille then? Is that how this works? Maybe
it's
Vlade?
possible. I don't. Actually, I wasn't that our friend McGlish that did that. Anthony that brought in all those prospects. I think he lined them up. That's what I want to say.
He was definitely part of it, part of the the scheduling and making those happen. But I will say, like, again, Vlade gave everyone the blueprint. Like, I don't draft you unless you work out for us. So when you do that, you're going to try and shoot your shot and get as many people in your building as you can. And then so many of them is, people shouldn't freak out if you don't see a name come through Sacramento because they go and attend so many agency workouts in other cities, Vegas, LA.
Pre-draft in Chicago.
100%. Yeah.
The G League thing is playing out this year.
I like how my only movie reference I can make is 101 Dalmatians.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Did you do your homework assignment? What did we
Culture.
task him with?
What platform is it on?
Oh, what? There's something about Mary?
Yeah.
Oh man, I
on,
don't know.
Somebody
Video
help me.
on demand.
GTS,
Amazon.
Google that.
VHS.
I have it here on DVD, so if you're around, you can just drive up and pick it up in the rain. I would sit here and watch it with you, Brenden. So it's different though. Like Sean and I have been so used to this for years. Like again, that 1 year with 101, I figure we had 17 draft workouts. Like, and then we're here doing the podcast because the Kings didn't invite us. They didn't invite us to the pre-draft workout. And I think it's partially because their entire media relations staff is gone. I think it's partially because they just went through COVID and they can get away with it. Like, I think we did a couple of Zoom calls at one point with some of these guys. But Sean, just as someone who's covered this forever, like, we got to get back in there for these, right?
Yeah, I hope it definitely changes. Maybe this isn't the year it'll change. Maybe once you get some people in place. I do hope that they return because I feel like having the stories that come through, having people in your building is showing that you've done your due diligence. And putting it on paper is one thing. And look, I know there's the constant reminder of seeing Kawhi Leonard wearing a Kings jersey sitting in your gym and Damian Lillard wearing a Kings jersey sitting in your gym and famously, seeing that draft blow up in your face. However, it shows you at least had the person there. You show that you're not getting skipped over, which has happened in the past. You've had people that you'd want to bring in and would not work out for you. Give you an example. Steph Curry never worked out for the Warriors. Steph Curry worked out for the Kings in a very famous pre-draft workout. But granted, it worked out well for the Warriors, but to have people skip you by, I think shows that I think it looks bad. I just think it does. To show that you had the chance to get somebody and you kick the tires on them. Look, there's no one's expecting you to have a crystal ball and know how anything's going to work out, but it shows you're doing your due diligence and you're putting them out there. And it also shows some of the, the local people that are able to come in that have local ties. You learn more about these draft prospects along the way. I think it does a really good job of, especially when you're not, I don't care where you're drafting in the draft, having the ability to have those people on your floor and even have your media talk to them. It takes the mystery out of, with the 7th pick in the 2022 draft, the Sacramento Kings select Joe Bag of Donuts, and everyone goes, who the F is that? And you have nothing to go to, and you just don't know anything, and there's this whole cold start to that person's future. By having somebody in your building and having the media being able to talk to them, I think, in my opinion, it helps ease the way in for your fan base to get to know somebody and like somebody and have a rooting interest in somebody. Look, that you can dismiss that. Look, the front office shouldn't give a damn about any of that. But it matters. When you draft a guy that people are excited about, De'Aaron Fox is probably the last one I can really remember that this fan base got excited about. Guess what? They went out and bought freaking tickets. So that matters. It is a business at the end of the day. You want to see people in the stands, get these stories out there, get people, let them have the access to these people, especially coming out of a awful pandemic where the access was not there. So that's my soapbox for the day. I think that access matters around, especially a sports team that isn't any damn good. So try to change your narrative. Be better. If you want to be like these upper echelon teams in the league that do it right, do it right.
It's interesting because it's almost like they don't think that we still hear what happens at these things. So we all know that there was a workout with Justin Jackson and there was a couple of big names in that, but Kyle Kuzma, right? And Kyle Kuzma took everyone to the woodshed, and the coaching staff wanted Kyle Kuzma. They wanted Kyle Kuzma because they're all friends with Larry Kristowiak, who was his college coach. They all coached in the minor leagues with Larry Kristowiak. And so they all knew about Kuzma coming in. And then they take Justin Jackson at number 15 and Kuzma falls to 27. One of them is a really good player in the league and the other one is in the G League. And unfortunately the Kings chose the one that's in the G League. And so, we always hear anyways about a lot of what happens just because, agent talk and players around the building and, you always end up getting a little bit of the story. So I would like to have a little bit more access, and I'd like to be there a little bit more, even though gas prices just seemingly keep going up. I'm not sure, where they'll end. So I'm do I really want to drive in the rain and spend, $47 on gas getting there and back? But outside of that, I'd also like to see Brenden get a look at this because it's a lot different to do a mock draft when you meet the kid, you meet the player, you have an idea of who they are, you hear how they talk, you get, you see how they handle the media, if they're timid, if they're confident. You can learn a lot from this process. And that's why I kind of hope that Brenden, you get a shot to take some of these guys in.
But it's also tradition, man. It's not a tradition that should be broken. These are you learn about people. Look, this summer for basketball outside of summer league and really summer league. I mean, look, whatever you can treat it. Most people, there's a lot of people that don't even give a damn about summer league. But what does football do so well? It's a year-round sport. The NFL is a year-round sport, topical all the time. The NBA stays topical and relevant with things like this in your local markets. And all the good teams still do it. They all still do it. To all of a sudden be the team that's oh no, we're going to be secretive and we'll let you know, we'll get word of who comes through, be it through agencies or even if the team wants to announce it themselves, that's fine. But if you have somebody like Jordan Shackelford in your building, there's a reason you brought him here. There's a reason you're kicking the tires on him. There's a reason you want to see him. Help get that story out there. Help get that interest out there. You want your city to be talking about you. You don't want your city to be talking about the Warriors right now who are in the playoffs and looking like they're primed for an NBA Finals run. So this is how you get back your your fan base in a way. I think it's a small step, and it's one that just makes the most sense. And it's not a lot of work, to be honest. I know there's some struggles right now with the way the organization is structured. But when they're right, this is something that I expect and I would fight to hope bring back.
Yeah, I'd love to be a part of it for sure. One interesting aspect to me is just like over or undervaluing and finding the balance in how they interview and interact compared to like on-floor production, because obviously both are important, but kind of gauging and finding that balance. Like I think of, how it's whispered that like Golden State didn't want anything to do with LaMelo because of an interview. And my understanding that LaMelo's not a very good interview. If you hear him talk, there's like a Mike Schmitz, Mike Schmitz watches film with a lot of guys in the draft process. You watch one with LaMelo, it's easy to see why like you would maybe think a little bit more about it, but obviously on court, LaMelo gets it done. So like it's an interesting aspect to me that I'd like to kind of experience a little bit and figure out how to find that balance. And for what it's worth, just these 6 guys that Sacramento brought in, I kind of just did a brief bit of background on them before we hopped on here. And like Vicini's board, just that one is the only one I pulled up for him, but like Lee from Davidson is 53rd. Juzang, UCLA is 84th. Burton from Richmond is 80th. So again, it's like late second rounders. Maybe somebody falls in love with somebody you never know in the second round, really. And every single one of these guys is at least a junior, if not older. Shackelford's the only guy who's not 6'6" or higher, and 6'6" or taller. And outside of Brooks and Mutz, they're all at least 35% three-point shooters on pretty significant volume for some of them. And then Brooks and Mutz are 2 pretty big stock guys who Monty has a little bit of a history of going after guys with some steal and block rates, maybe a little bit of a defensive impact. So length and shooting.
Like doing this for so long. I mean, like we had the Jimmer thing where the lady hid in the bushes. Isaiah Thomas came through. That was the only pre-draft workout I missed in 2011.
Can I get the spark notes on this lady hid in the bushes?
You might have to go down
There's
that
a lady
road
with a sign like "We love you, Jimmer" or something, hiding in the bushes at Arco Arena. Like, so when Jimmer drove up, Jimmer also, like when he did get drafted by the Kings, he drove like this really crappy like teal blue Hyundai Elantra. And one night his dad came out after a preseason game. I was walking out, and his dad is wandering the parking lot looking for his car, for Jimmer's car. And so Alfredette like hopped in the front seat of my truck at the time, and I drove him all around the parking lot looking for Jimmer's car, which again was like a $3,500 car. It was pretty interesting, but like that, I think part of it is that. I mean, Michael Carter Williams famously saying like, yeah, I think myself was like Jason Kidd, but not like the
in his prime.
Yeah, not the old like sort of dumpy Jason Kidd who shoot like is incredible and winning champions, but like the Jason Kidd in his prime is like, oh, okay. And then you also hear that he missed like 99 out of 100 of his jump shots in his pre-draft workout and broke down on the floor. You get Taco Fall walking in, and everyone in the building is like, holy cow, like what, that is one gigantic human being. So you get like all of these things, or even like a guy like Lou Dort came through and you're like, man, that dude is ripped and there's something about him. And there are certain guys that come through that you're like, they draw your interest, and so you end up following their career a little more closely because you had conversations with them. Even like Klay Thompson. Sean, it was you who asked him about his marijuana arrest right beforehand, right?
I may have alluded to it. I mean, there was a cloud, pun intended, hanging over Klay Thompson coming in. So, but again, I mean, I've known that kid since he was in high school. And or been familiar. I don't really know him, but like been familiar with him. That guy was insane high school player that was on all the AAU teams, and the one guy that would just defend and lock you up and still be capable of going out there and scoring. So having him, like him and Brandon Jennings, two are probably among the two best basketball high school players I've seen in my era. Because I didn't really get Jason Kidd, I was too young. So those two, and especially in California, just incredible high school players.
Ryan Anderson, he was good.
Yeah,
too,
he's up
in
there.
Sacramento. Yeah. So
I got Marcus Bagley.
I covered Marcus. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, in the state of California, like what those two dudes did was pretty impeccable.
We had Marcus Bagley come through for a pre-draft workout, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So
no. No.
Are you sure?
I can't remember.
I can't remember either. No, his freshman year. Oh no, it would have been last year, wouldn't it? Interesting. I was thinking we did. Okay, so outside of that, again, I hope we're let back into building because it is important in my opinions because it gives us like a better understanding of who some of these players are, and you get guys that are just much bigger, or much shorter, or much longer, like with wingspan wise, and you like they come in the building and you're just like, holy cow. Like either you like somebody or you don't. Like they're a bad interview, they're a good interview. It just adds more, I don't know, more information to the pot when you're trying to evaluate some of these guys. So I think it's important. I don't know. Do you guys have a good Mother's Day?
Yeah. Well, you didn't.
Oh no, I had a great Mother's Day. It was the day before.
Okay. Apologies.
So I'll tell this story really quick. Because I did post it on the interwebs. So on Saturday, we had to move my son's boat. And yes, my son has his own pontoon boat, but it's a long story. He built it for a senior project with my dad. They whittled it out of clay. That's how we roll here with the Hams. He took a boat that was literally given to him and tore it down to nothing and rebuilt it for a senior project, and it's really beautiful and cool.
If you go camping with James and you don't make your own fire by rubbing sticks together, you're just not a camp. You're just not that.
Sean, I don't camp.
Yeah, I don't either. Camp.
I do go to building a culture.
I go to the water. Yes, I go to the water. The water's like right down the hill for me. Yeah. Anyway, so we had to move my son's boat from one parking spot to another on the lake, like it's in the water. And so while moving it, he was backing out, and he has umbrellas on the front of his boat that we, usually are down, but like during the summer he pops up because he's pasty white like I am. Anyway, one of the umbrellas catches on the overhang that the boat's underneath and gets knocked into the water. So I hop across. The boat is lifted up out of the water on a boat lift. So it's got pieces of wood that are out in the water. So I'm jumping across the pieces of wood to go save the umbrella, which is now sinking in the water. I lean over to grab the umbrella and I hear plonk, and I look down and I'm like, oh no. So my iPhone 13 into the lake. So me and my son, like, first of all, I had sweatpants on and the water's still freezing. So me and my son are sitting there discussing which one of us has to go get in the water to go try to find my cell phone. He ran up to the...
How deep is said water right now?
Well, it's right on the maybe 12 feet off the shoreline, maybe 10 feet, 12 feet. So it's probably only like 5 feet deep, right? But then it's 5 feet until the bottom, and then the bottom is a bunch of silt, and there's little fish everywhere, and the fish sometimes, especially if you're near shore, they like to bite things like freckles, which I have freckles. And so, like if you're out in the middle of the lake, there's no
freckles?
problem. Yes.
You freckle assassin.
So anyway, we're amongst friends here. So I'm like, okay, I got to get in and try to find the phone. So I literally just stripped down to my skivvies, and I'm like, all right, I'm getting in the water. Sean's laughing. That's right. So I'm sitting here, like I'm in the water, toes in the muck, trying to squish through all of the silt in this one little area and find my phone in the water. And I did this for like
Did you
Well,
find? Do you have goggles? Are you able to
Well,
see
I
anything?
went. My wife brought a mask down and then laughed at me for wearing my skivvies. So anyway, I'm sitting there with a mask, looking in the water, trying to find my phone. My son keeps calling it, hoping that it will light up underwater, which it never did. Um, anyway, in the meantime, I don't realize that it went from like an overcast morning to bright and sunny. So I'm out there for like maybe 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer, trying to find the phone
In the skivvies.
in my skivvies. And I got torched. So my whole entire back is bright red, which I didn't even realize at the time. Normally, I'm very cognizant of that because of how pale I am, but I was very focused and the water was freezing cold. Anyway, I don't end up finding my phone. And the worst part is, like, it's Saturday, right? And by the time I get done, we get in the car, I drive down. I found out that I had insurance on the phone, which I was worried at first I wasn't going to have insurance. I was going to have to pay like $1,000 to pay off the phone and then start another whatever, with Verizon. But they said, oh, no, you have insurance. So they sent me a new phone, but it didn't get here until Monday at like 7 o'clock. So I had to work the whole weekend with a really bad, like old Samsung phone that my dad had. And so while all the news is breaking, I don't have my phone. And when people text me, if they have an iPhone, it goes to my iPhone account, not to the new phone. And so I'm not getting any. So I'm sending out texts. I don't have any contacts. I went to the movies with my family because I'm like, forget this, man. It's Mother's Day. It's my son's birthday. We're going to focus on that. But I brought my laptop. And in between Fantastic Beasts and Doctor Strange, I actually had my laptop out and was like confirming and doing all that stuff. But again, like piggybacking off my wife's cell phone's internet inside of the studio movie grill. Yeah, so it was an ordeal. Losing it's just because it's the worst day ever to lose your phone because I knew what was going to come. There was no way they weren't going to like make the coaching hire on Sunday. I'm glad they waited as long as they did in the day, but yeah, it was traumatic. Losing your phone, man, like how reliant we are on those things now, it's just horrible. And I will probably invest in like having a backup phone here at the house in case I do have that situation again.
A burner. You're gonna have a burner.
I refuse to have a burner, Sean. No James burner phone. I even like when I was at NBC, I turned down like the company phone. I'm like, nope. I'm not a 2-phone guy. Never going to be a 2-phone guy. Yeah. So anyway, that's the story of my Mother's Day, which and the day before. So now I have all the skin on my back is dying and I have like the itchies starting and yeah, there's nothing I can do about it.
How long were you in the water?
About 2 hours.
And it was cold.
Wow.
Oh, it was freezing cold. Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
nobody brought you like any. You don't live that far. Like you said, it's just down the hill, right?
Oh no, I can see the boat from my
No
window
one
right
brought
here.
you some like.
That's what he always swims in.
Oh no, I did eventually go home and get swim trunks on and went back
Okay.
and went
Okay.
in, but initially for like the first hour it was just like, I mean, there's no one on the water. Everyone's hiding out in their house still because the weather is all weird and everything else. But
Or because there's some weirdo doing who knows what on the edge of the water.
there you go, some dude out there,
I
some
think I'm gonna pass
butt ass
today.
white guy turning red. Yeah. So anyway, that's the story. I hope everyone enjoyed James's misery of losing his cell phone, and luckily I'm all back up and going. I do have.
What'd you get?
Well, they sent me a brand new replacement.
So
Yeah.
you got the. I've been wondering because now that I'm off to a new. I still have an old SE, which I've showed you guys before, but yeah. So I'm now at the moment where I can go and because I took it with me from previous employer at 10. Now I'm at 40 and. I get to actually upgrade my phone and have a personal phone because they're different. They don't give you your own company phone like the old place does. They just give you an allowance to expense your bill.
nice.
So I get to keep my own phone, and by virtue of doing that, this will be the first time in 12 years that I actually get to have a personal phone. So that's fun.
Did they charge you on the way out the door for your phone? Did they say, okay, you're going to have to pay for the equipment? And you're like, okay. And they're like, we need $8 from you.
The phone was so goddamn old, they just said keep it.
They just felt bad. Like,
Yeah.
Are we
like,
that bad of employers that we've left you with that phone? Is that why you're leaving us?
They were tremendous. They were so tremendous. They just said, "You really want your phone? Here you go." So
You should keep it in case you ever drop your phone in the water and you need a backup, Sean.
see there.
Yeah.
Our
See?
group chat has blue texts. How's this working with this Samsung right here?
Well, because I got my phone back.
Yeah, he's back.
No,
up
on
there
Sean's side.
now. No, I still. It's a SE. It's a. What do you
Oh,
mean? It's an
Apple?
iPhone.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you.
Oh, it's just a
yeah.
really old.
It's
Yeah.
Good. Good for the
Rihanna.
good for the YouTube. I have this T-shirt and I'll be wearing it in 2 weeks at Bottle Rock.
Bottle Rock. Sean is going to Bottle Rock. Okay. I think that's gonna do. Did you guys, Brenden? Do you have any final thoughts?
No, it just sounds like the older generation is so attached to their devices. It's just crazy to me. But that's all I got, really.
It's like a magic wand to you. It's just part of your hand. You don't even know. You wouldn't even know how to live without it. I don't. Yeah. Sean.
I'm very disappointed there was no Molly appearance in this podcast on the YouTubes.
For a brief moment.
Did she? I missed her. Okay. Well, we didn't see her. And Brenden, the homework assignment is due. So something about Mary, and then we're going to add to that. I'm going to say swingers because, again,
Yep.
every man it should see that movie.
Swingers.
All right.
He's writing it down.
I am writing
Make sure
it down.
you make sure it's one of those titles where you're not so sure you got the right movie. Make sure you get the Vince Vaughn, Jon Favreau swingers. So you know
There's some other ones out there.
yes,
I'm gonna
potentially.
guess that yes.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
Oh no, Sean, have you seen Doctor Strange yet?
No, because I'm anti comic book movies unless it's Batman. There's too many of them. I can't.
What?
One day I'll get there. One day I'll get there, James, and I'll celebrate like everybody else. But I've only seen a handful of Marvel. There's just far too many, man. And I feel like
they're
when I do
spectacular.
it, I just need to go in whatever order the internet suggests going in, and
Yeah.
I'll do that one day. But I
Then
just
you'll never catch up,
can't
though.
do it because they won't stop making these freaking
I know.
comic book movies. There's
I
too
saw
many.
I saw the Spider-Man a while ago and instantly knew, man, I missed the last movie because they clearly started from a point that I was not at yet.
I really
Well,
wanted
that
to see.
and you need to see like the previous 6.
And it's always like, oh, of course, I should have known that this was this person's third removed cousin who somehow has a connection to the Allspark. I have no clue.
All right. Yeah.
I wanted to see the Nicolas Cage, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, and I have not been able to go see that yet.
I haven't either. Yeah,
But I
need
will.
to. I need to go see it as well. I'll say this: I'm not going to do spoilers for those of you who are huge Marvel fans, but I will tell you this: if you're gonna go watch Doctor Strange, there's this whole list of things you have to watch before Doctor Strange, and so me and my 14-year-old, we went through most of them. So we did the What If series on Disney Plus. We watched WandaVision. We watched Moon Knight and like whatever it is. And we've seen every
Swingers.
Marvel movie, Swingers, all of those. If you really want to get the full experience, you have to watch The Evil Dead, The Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness. Sean, do you know what those are?
Bruce Campbell, baby.
Bruce Campbell, baby. But Sam Raimi,
Sam Raimi.
who is
Who also
the
did Darkman, which was not very good.
No, but he's the director, and there are so many pieces to that are similar and will draw you back to it.
I will say that Benedict Cumberbatch was fantastic on SNL, and Brenden SNL is a variety show on NBC that has been around since the 70s and is fantastic and spawned
That's what Pete Davidson's from. I got you.
There you go. Okay, we're
He
good.
said variety show.
Sketch comedy.
Sketch comedy show.
He was tremendous. He was tremendous in this last week SNL. I'm a huge SNL fan.
Yeah, Sean is a huge Saturday Night Live fan. All right. Well, hey, we've dragged this out as long as humanly possible. I hope you're enjoying the longer podcast because it does make sense with there being 3 of us that we go a little bit longer. We are shifting gears going forward. And we'll cover, as Mike Brown hires his assistants and stuff like that. But really, at this point, we need to shift gears to the draft. We'll start Thursday with more draft coverage. We'll start peppering in some sort of free agency coverage and start breaking down some of the options that the Kings might have. We'll talk about some players that could become available and the Kings might trade for. We'll start, once the hot stove starts heating up, leading into the draft, we'll start in on that. It's going to be a wild couple of weeks here as the Kings try to go from a 30-win team to a 50-win team and build something for Mike Brown on the fly. So stick with us. We'll be here all summer long doing this every Tuesday and Thursday. Outside of that, thanks to my two co-hosts here for dropping by, Mr. Sean Cunningham from Fox 40, Mr. Brenden Nunes from the King's Herald and the King's Pulse podcast. Again, we're going to start cranking things up here, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for tuning in to the King's Beat podcast. Make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscription. Make sure to jump on board with the King's Beat subscription. Happy hours are coming. They're just around the corner. May 17th is the NBA draft lottery. So mark that on your calendars, as it's going to be a fun couple of weeks. So I am James Ham. Got Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes. You guys have a good week. We'll see you on Thursday.